All right, we're going to be doing an activity today that typically we would do it as a class. And we'd have a big old dot plot. Actually, we'd have a number of dot plots on the board. But due to circumstances, we're going to be doing it a little differently today. So you're going to be doing the Justin Timberlake activity that's enclosed with your Schoology assignment today. But you're going to be using a bit of a different method. Now, the worksheet, you can use some of it for this. I'd say use it for the reflection questions because you're actually going to be performing the samples using Staplet today. So you're going to be going to staplet.com, https //staplet.com, and go. You're going to scroll down. You see data analysis, normal distributions, and probability. We're going to be doing activities today. So we're going to go to How Much Do Fans Like Justin Timberlake, Part 1. You're going to click on this. Now, you have two options. Start a new code as a teacher and enter an existing class code. You are going to start a new class code as a teacher. The reason is, if you enter in the existing class code, they only make these activities available for 5 minutes at a time. And I want to give you guys a little bit more freedom than that, especially people who are working remotely today. So you're going to click on Start a New Class Code as a Teacher. And it's going to give you this message. You don't even need it. This is only if you were going to be sharing it with other students, but you're going to be doing this whole thing on your own today. So you're going to click Close. And you will notice that you have this little dancing icon here. It's pretending to be singing. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go down and you're going to do Enable Data Collection for 5 minutes. You can continue to extend this as needed. Hopefully it doesn't take 5 minutes, but you can do what you please. So we're going to do Enable for 5 minutes, and we're going to do Extend it for 5 minutes. We're going to do that a few times. Now you're going to scroll right here to the top. Now you notice that they have more fans than the worksheet does. The worksheet kind of limits your rows. So this is kind of cool anyway. It gives you more values you're going to be choosing from. Now the goal is, these are all audience members and this is the concert. And you want to get a gauge for how much fans enjoy the Justin Timberlake concert. So then you're going to estimate the average. Now we're going to assume that we can't sample all 100 people here. Just can't be done. Or actually, we can't perform a census for all 100 people, excuse me. So we're going to be doing samples today. And the cool thing is, this is going to do the sampling for you. So for the simple random sample, you're going to click Generate Sample, and watch what happens. It randomly selects people for you. It's pretty cool. You're going to do the same thing here for Stratify by row. Now when you're stratifying by row, let's generate the sample. Hopefully you can notice that you are grabbing people from each vertical row. What I mean by that is, I pulled this up because this always messes people up. Stratify by row, it's going like this. It's randomly selecting people from here, from here, from here, from here, and from here. So you'll notice that they did that. And then you're going to be stratifying by column. So you're going to hit Generate Sample, and it stratifies by column. And you can do Reveal Results. And you'll notice that it has all the ratings for how people enjoyed the concert. And then it has those ratings in relation to who you did. Now here's what you're going to do next. You're going to do Generate New Sample. And you'll notice it creates a dot plot for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to create Generate New Sample. Ideally, let's do this about, let's see, I've done it about 7 or 8 times. If you can do it 20 times, that'd be awesome. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I got myself a nice little dot plot. Heck, if you want to keep going, you can. And what you'll notice is the more you do it, hopefully you'll notice a pattern here. One, you get a range. You notice that some of your data might be, or your statistics rather, are kind of bunching up in a specific area. It gives you some observations here. There are 31 dots in the selected region. So what you're going to do is once you get a lot of dots, just take a picture of it. Take a screenshot of it. And you can include that screenshot on your worksheet. And this is what's going to simulate us doing it as a class. Because what we would do is I'd have you guys do a bunch of different samples. We'd have the dot plot in the back, and then you'd plot it just like so. You can do the same thing here, generate a new sample. Oh, and I'm doing it for Stratify by column, but you also want to do it for Stratify by row. Just keep hitting the button, and you'll notice that it keeps doing different samples. That's kind of neat. It's randomly selecting by row. Oh, oops. And the more you do it, you'll notice you get a pretty cool dot plot. And what this is representing, all those dots represent statistics right now. You want to remember that. These are all averages. They're taking averages of each of your samples here. They're taking the average of this sample, they're plotting it. Generate new sample, they're taking the average of that sample, they're plotting it on the dot plot. Now for stratifying by column, you'll notice that they're doing the same thing. Generate new sample, okay? Keep doing it. And I like doing this a lot because the more samples you do, the more statistics you get. The more statistics you get, the more accurate it is. Cool, and you notice you get a nice dot plot. So what you do is just take pictures of each of your dot plots, and you can include them on the worksheet. And make sure you label them. Make sure we indicate which ones are stratifying by row, stratifying by columns, simple random sample, and so on. Cool. All right, and let's see. Collect, you can do up to 2,000. This would be if we are entering it in manually. You're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be using the simulation. And the cool thing about simulations is more and more college level statistics courses are doing their work based on simulations instead of just based on traditional calculations. One of the reasons is we have the tools for simulations and they can be a lot easier. In some cases, they can even be more accurate than traditional statistics. So using this method is a great method. All right, so say we've done this. We've done the simple random sample. We've done 2 stratifying, and we can even take a look here and compare. What I would do when you're comparing distributions, you want to use this acronym. SOCS, S-O-C-S. So we want to note the shape, outliers, / gaps. We want C for center, and S, the last one, is for spread or range. So when you're describing distributions, you want to describe them based on these attributes. So say I want to add something, right? I'm going to go to the photo library, photos. I'm going to insert 2 photos. Not perfect, but let's see what I can do here. So now I've got 2 dot plots. Now ideally, you want to compare all of them, but I'm just going to show you how I can use this method to compare these. Now if I look here, your center is about where you're going to find half of your dots. So if I'm going to do that, I can approximate my center's probably going to be around here, like maybe around just above 78. Down here, where's my center? My center is right around the same point, so they share the same center. Because when you're comparing distributions, you want to not just state things, you want to make comparisons. All right? Any outliers or gaps. Now, what we could say is, let's see, this might look like an outlier, but you want to look for a lot of space, and you'll notice that there's not, numerically, there's not a big difference between 82 and 84. And there's not, even here, you might be like, oh, there's a gap. But this would be like between 74 and a half and 75. That's really not that much of a gap. So, I mean, when you're noting gaps, you want to make sure that it's going to be, something substantial numerically. No gaps. So I'm going to put that. Now, for my center, I already mentioned that. Now, for the shape, you could say that this is almost unimodal. What I mean by that? Actually, I wouldn't even say it's a unimodal. Actually, I could, because if you notice, you have some peaks right here. You have multiple peaks right here towards the center. And I'll even say multiple peaks in the center. I'll even say between, I'm going to mention the values, between 76 and 80. Whereas up here, let's see, It's pretty distinct. We have our mode right here is very distinct. We have a mode right here just below 79. So we could say that it is, mode just below 80. But it might also mention this cluster of values just above 78. Because that's important too, because you notice they're really condensed. Okay. Condensed stats near 78. So if I were comparing these, right, I would say that for, let's see, I think this one was stratified by row. It definitely was. So for stratified by row, I'd say, well, the mode's just below 80, but there's really a lot of condensed statistics near 78. Whereas for stratified by column, it's unimodal with multiple peaks between 76 and 80. And then the last thing you want to know is the spread. So for the spread here, you'll notice my lowest value is about 72. My highest is about 85. So I could say my spread or my range is, we'll say 85 minus 72. Whoops. You get about 13. Up here, you have a much smaller spread. So I'll even put that smaller spread or range. I'm going to use the word range. And for here, you basically have between 76 and maybe 81. So if you do 81 minus 76, you get about 5. So these are the key things you want to know when you're comparing. You want to take note of the shape. You want to take note of any gaps or outliers. The center, you can approximate it. You don't have to sit there and count all the dots. You remember your median. Like to think of the balancing point. Where does it balance, right? Like if you're looking at this and you had to make a teeter-totter out of it, where would you balance it? Same thing here. If you had to look at your data, where would you balance it? That's where you'd find your median. Notice I'm putting a little triangle there to indicate a teeter-totter. And then the spread and the range. And it's good to compare these. Because if it asks you, I'm not 100% sure in the directions if it asks you, but it's good to know this. That's how you compare. Now, we're going to do one more part here because you'll notice that there is a part 2 on the website. How much do fans like Justin Timberlake part 2? You're going to do that too. Start a new code as a class teacher. You're going to pretend you're a teacher today. And now you're going to notice you can't do anything unless you go down below. You have to go down below. Enable data collection for 5 minutes. You can even do extend for 5 minutes. And then you're going to do the same thing again. You're going to start with a simple random sample. Generate the sample. Now for your cluster sample. You'll notice that I just selected one entire row. What it's doing in that case is it is using clusters. And I'll show you what I mean. Like for the clusters, this says stratify by column. We'll pretend that that's clusters. Remember, clusters are when you randomly select a group and use everybody in that group. This would be a cluster. This would be a cluster too. This would be a cluster, and this would be a cluster, as would this. Those are all clusters according to this. If we're doing clusters by rows. So you're going to do that. And then systematic, they're going to go with every eighth. This is interesting. Randomly choose a fan at the starting point, and then move down the rows to interview every eighth fan. After the last row, wrap back to the first row. Okay. I'm curious how they did this, because it does not look like every eighth. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like 7. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm having a little difficulty finding the eighth here, unless they did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess if you really look, you can probably find how they asked every eighth person. I don't know if they're following a uniform pattern here, but nonetheless, you can just generate a sample again. Again, we like doing this, because what happens when we do this, if we do reveal results, remember we have to click reveal results, and then if you just click generate new samples, that's where we get a dot plot that's going to have statistics. Now, one thing to remember too, on a dot plot like this, they're giving us dots, But technically, what they should be doing is they should be representing, instead of using dots, they're going to use what are called X bars. X bar is the mean of a sample, which is a statistic, as we know. If it's a summary of a sample, it is a statistic. Now, if it was the summary of a census, where it'd be a parameter, it would look like this, mu. That is the mean of a census parameter. So technically, if we were doing this in class, right, this is what our dot plot would look like. We'd have values. We'd have a bunch of X bars instead of dots. That's okay. You can still call it a dot plot. They're not going to call it an X bar plot. So you'd probably have something that looked like this, where people were putting all their X bars and their statistics. Technically, that's what it should be looking like, but we're not going to pick hairs here. So what I just did here was I showed you how we're going to use that simulation on Staplet to basically do what we would have done as a class on a whiteboard using markers, pre-COVID. So hopefully this helps you get through this activity a bit. Then you're going to compare and see which one of these samples was more accurate. I'll give you a hint. I would not go with the simple random sample. And I'll lead you in another direction too. If you're looking at a concert, right? Who is most likely to have the best time out of the people who go to the concert? The people who sit in the front or the people who sit in the back? I'll let you think about that. All right, if you have questions, you can always reach out to me. Best of luck with your activity.